I'm starting to get really fed up because I don't really like the way my knob looks. It can be quite tricky to pull off. I'll try and make this one a little bit shorter, and then you can pull it off no problem. A few videos back, I showed you guys how to do the focus heater panel mod and how to change the bulbs inside it, and I also made a video showing you how to change the bulbs inside the rest of the switches and controls. And they're looking great, but I took a little bit of a break from it in the last couple of videos just to try and vary the content a little bit. But I'm starting to get really fed up of having all these nice LED switches and dials and everything in the panel down here, only to go to my radio and everything lights up in green. So today I'm going to be showing you how to change the bulbs in the standard Ford radio. Now, hopefully I will be upgrading the radio to an aftermarket one in the near future, but I thought for the sake of the cost of a couple of LEDs and a little bit of my time, I might as well show you how to change the bulbs in the standard unit. The LEDs that we're going to be using are slightly different from the ones we used last time, but it will be the same basic principles. Hopefully the process will be a little bit quicker and easier as well, but I'll try and explain in as much detail as I can as I go along. But I will try and keep it a little bit shorter than I did last time, because the last couple of videos I've done on interior LEDs did drag on a little bit, so I'll try and make this one a little bit shorter. Now, to remove the factory radio, you're going to want a set of radio keys. I like to keep a set in my owner's manual, and I've also got a set free with my trim removal toolkit. I have actually seen people use steak knives to remove the radio, but honestly, do yourself a favor and just get a set of these. If I can find a decent link, I'll leave one down in the description. And don't any of you ask me for a link to these. So you want to push the radio keys with this little indent facing inwards into the four corners of the radio. Once they're located, you should hear a little click. Then what you want to do, grab the top and bottom key on one side, pull outwards and away from the center, and then do the same on the other side, and the radio should just slide forward. Just to show you quickly how the mechanism works, as you insert the key, that little groove I showed you earlier just clicks into that tab there, and then as you lever on the key and pull that outwards, it pushes that tab in, and this tiny little tab on the side there moves just enough for the radio to release. With the radio released, I can slide it forward, and then I can access the wiring on the back of the unit. The aerial connection just pulls right off, and then the main harness has this kind of lever mechanism. There's a small tab which you need to press down, then you can lift the lever up, and as you lift the lever up, you can pull the connector out from the back of the radio. Okay, so we've got the radio inside on the bench, and I'm about to show you how to start taking this apart so we can get to the LEDs that we're going to change. But just before we do, I'm just going to say a massive thank you once again to Roger, Andrew, who helped me out with this, just how to get some of this apart. He's given me some pointers like he always does with this sort of stuff. But guys, remember, if you want any LED bulb swaps or conversions doing, then go check out Roger Andrew. I'll leave a link to his Facebook page in the description. He can do these radios, he can do all the other switches and dials like I've shown you how to do in previous videos. He can also do the focus heater panel mod, and he can do speedos and dials and all that good stuff as well. So like I said, link in the description if you don't fancy tackling it yourself, like I'm going to show you how to do in this video and a few other videos coming up as well. But for now, let's crack on with the radio. The first thing that we need to do is get the front face off the radio. Now, it's attached to this kind of metal frame around it, and it's just held on with 4 small Torx screws, 2 on either side. With these removed, we can pull the front face of the radio away from the rest of the unit, but do be careful at this point because there's a ribbon cable inside which you need to release, and you don't want to break that. It can be quite tricky to pull off, so I find just levering behind it with a small screwdriver, a little bit at a time on each side, loosens it, and then you can pull it off no problem. With the front panel removed, you can set the main body of the radio off to one side, and next we need to remove this metal frame from the back of the front panel. It's held on with 4 Torx screws, and then there's 7 clips, 3 on the top and 4 on the bottom. You may be able to release them by hand, but if you're struggling, some thin screwdrivers are your friend here. Next we need to remove the PCB, which is just held in by these 4 black posts. There's a couple of tabs on each side of each post, so just squeeze these in, and then you can lift the PCB away from the front panel. So that gives us access to all the LEDs that light up the buttons and controls, but there's still 4 more we need to get to that light up the back of the screen. So we need to remove the screen that's just held by this metal casing to the PCB. So you just need to bend up the 3 tabs along the top and then twist the 3 tabs on the bottom so that they push back through the holes in the PCB, and then you can carefully lift the screen away from the board. Just be careful with the electrical connector because the pins on it are quite fragile. So with the screen removed, we can pop that off to one side because there isn't actually anything we need to do with this. That just displays the digits and stuff on the screen, but what we're changing is the backlights, which are these little LEDs here. So just quickly to go over the LEDs that you're going to need. Now, all the LEDs on this board are surface mount LEDs. So what we've got here is 29, surface mounted 1206 LEDs, which are these little ones that you can see there. So those are all the way around that go underneath the buttons and the volume control. And they're these little ones here. And then behind the screen, you've got 4 in total, so 2 on either side of these. And these are KA4040s. And off the PCB, they look like this. So basically, these are like a right angle LED, so they're actually pointing out this way to behind the screen. But again, they're mounted to the pads on the board. So those are the 2 types of LED that we're going to be using. And I'm going to do a quick polarity check on these before I use them and show you how to do it as well. So LED stands for light emitting diode. And a diode basically is an electrical device that only lets current flow in one way. This is the electrical symbol for a diode. So you've got the positive side over here, negative over here. So current will flow this way, but it is not allowed to flow back that way. The easiest way to remember it is the triangle points to the way the current is flowing. And then this line here is blocking current flowing back this way. That's why it's important we get our LEDs the right way round, because they have a specific polarity. Now, unfortunately, we don't have a symbol like that on our LED anywhere, but we do have a couple of markings on here that can tell us which way around this goes. Oh, and it's probably just worth mentioning, if you're talking about an LED, a light emitting diode, as opposed to a regular diode, it has these 2 little lines here to indicate that it's emitting light. Now, unfortunately, we don't have any markings like that on the front or the back of these little 1206 LEDs, but we do have a couple of other markings that I can talk you through what they actually mean just really quickly. So on this left-hand side of this one that's facing us, you can see that little green point just on the top left. I'm trying to point to it, but the camera goes out of focus. Just up here, there's a little spot of green, and that indicates the negative side of the LED. And then the one I've got next to it is just the reverse, but it's facing the same way. Now, I'm not sure why they do it this way, but the line on the right-hand side, the vertical line that goes top to bottom, that actually indicates the positive side on the back of these LEDs, which is really strange because on the circuit diagram of a diode or a light emitting diode, this vertical line means the negative side, but on the back of here, it indicates the positive side. And then the horizontal line that goes left to right that comes from it, that indicates the negative side. So I'm just going to show you that with this little tester that I've got. I've shown you this before in other videos I've done on LED swaps, but basically this is just a little 3-volt battery in a little holder with a positive and a negative wire. I'm going to touch those wires to each side of these LEDs and show you which round they go. There are no markings, unfortunately, on these KA4040s, so there isn't really anything to show you on there. I'm just going to have to use my little tester to show you which way around those go. So I'm just going to show you this really quickly. I've got my positive wire on the right, negative on the left, and when I touch those pads, that lights up. This is the same way around, just on the back. Hopefully you'll be able to see the light shining through. And then if I switch these round and put positive to the negative side of the LED and negative to the positive side, as you can see, nothing lights up, and same over here. So that is the 1206s. Now, like I said earlier, unfortunately with these KA4040s, I don't have any way of telling by any markings on them which way round they go, so I'm just going to have to test it with my little tester here. So I'm going to go with positive on the right, negative on the left, and that is lighting up. And then this one's the same way around. I've just got this one, so it's sitting on its back. As you can see, that is lighting up. If I switch these round, go the other way round, we get nothing, and same here, nothing lights up. So as the diode is facing you with a KA4040, the pads on the bottom are positive on the right and negative on the left. And because I'm so good to you guys, I've been around every single LED on this board and left a little minus mark next to the negative side of each LED, and I've also tested this with my little battery tester as well. So it's time to start removing all 29, yes 29 of these small 1206 LEDs. All I'm using for this is a cheap soldering iron that I got off eBay. Normally you would use a hot air jet for surface mount components, but as I don't have one at home, and as I'm guessing most of you likely don't have one as well, we're going at it with a cheap soldering iron. So all I'm doing is trying to heat up the solder on the pads each side of the LED, starting on one side and then quickly moving over to the other and back and two between them if I need to, so that the solder's softened on both sides, and then I can pull the LED away, or in this case kind of knock or scrape the LED off the board. Now before attaching the new LEDs, the proper way to do it would be to clean the pads off and apply new solder, but because I doubt many of you are going to want to bother doing that, we're just going to stick these straight back on, and I'm going to show you how easy it is. So all you need to do is hold the LED in place, and then you can just heat the solder up on the pad on that side, and then it'll tack in the one side, and then you can just heat up the solder on the other side, and it should tack the other side of the LED in, and then you can just check it to make sure it's firmly held on there. Then we're just going to attach the next LED really quickly, and then I'm going to show you how to check that you've got a good connection. So basically we're going to go back to our little tester, but rather than touching it on the actual LED itself, we're just going to touch it on the solder either side of where we've mounted the LED, and that way we know if the current is actually flowing through it, if it lights up, and that's how we know we've got a good joint. Right, on with the remaining 27 LEDs. So in that time lapse, you may have seen me using this weird blue pen thing, and all that is a flux pen. Flux is basically a solvent liquid that helps solder flow a little bit easier. This isn't essential for doing this job, which is why I showed you the first couple of LEDs without it, but because I have access to it, I'm going to use it. If you Google a flux pen, you can find disposable ones. Mine's refillable, but you guys are probably better off with the disposable type. Again, if I can find a decent link, I'll leave it in the description. Right, just 6 more of these little LEDs to remove. Now, like I mentioned a minute ago, the proper way to do this, once you've removed all the original LEDs, is to remove the remaining solder from the pads using this stuff that I've got in my hand here. This is solder wick, which is basically a copper braid. You hold it over the pads, then touch your soldering iron on top, which heats up the solder on the pad, and then it is wicked up into that copper braid, removing it and leaving you a nice clean pad. Now, I've already shown you that this is not essential, but it just gives you a nice, flat, smooth surface to attach your new LED to, rather than a raised surface from that leftover solder. As you can see here, the pads that I've cleaned off are nice and smooth, and the pads that I haven't are raised because there's still some solder remaining from the original LEDs. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and clean off the pads for the remaining 1206 LEDs that we've already removed, and then I've got to tackle those KA4040s. The two on the left-hand side of the screen are fairly easy to remove because I can actually get the soldering iron to cover both pads at once, so they just soften and slide out the way, no problem. But the two on the other side were definitely a bit more tricky. I had to go one at a time on the pads, and I had to be really careful not to damage that plug. Okay, so there we go. That is all the LEDs removed. I did just about manage to get these KA4040s off of here. I did a little bit of damage to this plastic plug here, but it was literally just the edge of it there. It hasn't actually damaged anything internally, so that should be fine. But now all those are removed and I've cleaned up all the pads, it's time to get all the new LEDs installed on the board. So because all the pads are nice and clean, these should be nice and easy to reinstall. All I'm doing is applying a little bit of flux to the pads, then holding the LEDs in place with my tweezers, then applying a little bit of solder to the tip of my soldering iron, and then I'm soldering in one pad at a time on each LED. This will be the same process for the KA4040s and the 1206s that we're going to do in a minute. Okay, so the dreaded KA4040s are on, and I've tested them and they're all working nicely. I did struggle a bit with this second one over here, but what I managed to do to get to the last pin was just to come in from the top straight down, and that managed to give me enough space. Now, it is tempting because of the size of the pads to kind of space these out this way a little bit more, but you've just got to be careful because when you're putting this back on, there's only a small gap that they actually fit in, and mine, I've spaced them out a tiny little bit, but they are right on the limit of being able to fit under this, so that's just one thing to bear in mind. But they're on, that clears, and now it's time to crack on with the rest of all the little 1206s. Okay, there we go. That's the LED swap done. All the bulbs are on there. I've tested everything and it's all working perfectly. So it's time to reassemble the rest of the radio, and then we can go and test this out in the car. Now, there is one more thing I'm going to be doing to the radio before it goes back in the car, but I need to reassemble everything first, so that's what I'm going to do next. And I just wanted to remind you really quickly that all the links to the LEDs that I've used will be down in the description. You'll need 29 of these 1206s and 4 of these KA4040s. These might be a little bit harder to get hold of. You can get them in the UK, but you tend to only be able to get them in like red, green, blue, and those sort of colours. I wanted them in white, and I had to get these from overseas. But like like I said, I will leave links in the description. Now all that's left to do is to put the radio back together. So I'm plugging the screen back in carefully and then bending the tabs on the top back into place and twisting the lower ones to secure the screen to the PCB. Then the PCB can be clipped back into the front panel, and then the front panel can be clipped back into the metal frame and secured with the 4 Torx screws. Connect the ribbon cable, and then the front assembly can be slid back onto the main body of the radio and secured with the 4 Torx screws. Okay, so that's the LED swap done, so let's go and get this back in the car. So there we go, the radio is back in, but there's no point me trying to show you just yet because it's still the middle of the day, so nothing's really going to show up. But while we're waiting for it to get dark, there's something else that I can be cracking on with. You'll notice that I haven't put the volume control knob back in here just yet, and there's a good reason for that. And that's because I don't really like the way my knob looks. And if you don't like the way your knob looks, then I've got just the thing for you. This video would have been perfect to have been sponsored by Manscaped or something. Manscaped, if you're listening, hit me up. Let's do something. But all joking aside, what I'm going to do is I'm going to swap this knob out for this one so that it matches the controls on the heater panel that we made. Now, I think this is actually for some sort of Volkswagen. That's why it's got this extra long stalk on here, but I'm going to cut that off. Then I'm going to hack this up with my Dremel, keeping the inside part that plugs onto our radio, and then I'm going to JB weld that onto the inside of here, and then this should fit no problem. These are actually pretty much bang on the same diameter. It's slightly smaller than the ones that I used on the heater panel. Okay, so as you can see, I've hacked up this piece to pretty much nothing off the original knob, and then that should just slide in there perfectly fine. Now, I was going to glue this in with the JB weld, but honestly, I don't think I'm going to have to. It's maybe a little bit loose. I'm going to try it, and if I have to come back and glue it later, then I will. But I'm not going to bore you with all that, so let's go and pop this in the car and see how it looks. Okay, there it is in the car, and what do you guys think? You know what? Originally, I didn't like it. It looked kind of like this big button nose on the radio, but on camera, funnily enough, I actually think it looks a lot better. I am going to have to glue that piece in the middle because it just gets stuck on the radio now, but that's not a problem. I can go and do that, but I'm not going to bother showing you all that because this video has been quite long already. And I still need to show you what this looks like lit up. So I'm going to catch up with you when it's a little bit darker and show you exactly how this is all looking. Okay, and there we go. This is how it is looking now that it's a little bit darker outside, and I'm so happy with how this has come out. It's looking so good now. We've got everything down here in white and then just red across the top row. That's exactly what I was after. Now, there is one thing that's standing out to me straight away, and it's the color of the bulbs behind these dials. These 2 buttons are okay, but just these dials here are looking a little bit yellow. I did struggle to get bulbs the right color temperature for these, but I have actually got some more that I'm going to install, so keep an eye on my Instagram and I will be updating those, and then I'll post some pictures of it. But overall for the radio, I'm really happy with how this has come out, and I'm actually loving the new knob on there as well. I think it looks really good, so I'm super happy with this. But there's just one more thing now with interior LEDs that we need to get sorted. And of course that is coming up in a future video, but for this one it's time to end, so thank you very much for watching and I'll see you next time.